In this video, we'll be doing a nice, easy Sunday morning job, changing the oil in a Matchless G3L WD. The service manual recommends that the oil filter is cleaned every 2,000 miles, and most sources will say that the oil should be replaced every 2,000 to 3,000 miles. The capacity, if you read the maintenance manual, is 3 pints, about 1.7 litres, and that's roughly half what would go in a modern bike. So my recommendation is every 2,000 miles, clean the filter and replace the oil, because it's pretty cheap anyway. Now, what oil you choose is entirely up to you, so please don't take my recommendation as gospel, but I use Castrol Classic XXL 40. This is a monograde oil. That means it's got the same viscosity more or less throughout the temperature range, and the higher the number, the thicker the oil. In this case 40 is a good middle of the road one, but not something you'd want to use in freezing temperatures. Here's an alternative. This is Silcoline Classic, and you'll see the numbers here are different. It says 20W50. What that means is it's got a low viscosity, that's 20 in low temperatures, and a higher viscosity, 50, when it gets warmer. That's an equally good choice. Whatever you choose, most people think that you should go for something with low detergents, and they're specifically formulated for classic engines. And the theory of that, and don't shoot me if you think this is wrong, but the theory of that is that it doesn't dislodge dirt, which will then block your oil channels. Well, you'll be glad to hear the first step in changing oil is go for a ride. Treat yourself, get the engine nice and warm, and get something ready to catch the oil. I use an old can, and I use a funnel with a bit of gauze in the neck. Next, take the oil cap off, and this just means that there's no kind of suck back and the oil will flow out nice and quickly. Now the oil's still a bit hot, so wear gloves of course, and it's time to undo the oil drain plug and direct the oil into your container. It's also important to drain the oil from the crankcase sump, and here's the sump plug here. You'll find that if the engine's warm, you won't get much oil from here, maybe half a cup. This is where the oil with the most dirt tends to collect, and failure to remove it can mean that the oil will back up and be sucked over the piston rings. The symptoms of this are a smoky exhaust and an oily and very sooty spark plug. Now to get the oil filter out, we need to access the nut. And there isn't really enough room underneath the saddle, so we're going to undo the bolts at the top of each spring and tilt the saddle forward. And you may as well do this while the oil's draining so you don't waste any time. Next, remove the screw cap that sits on top of the oil filter, and when you take that cap off, you'll notice that there's a spring underneath it. Then remove the rubber washer that sits around the neck of the aperture. And using a small screwdriver, carefully take out the dished washer that sits on top of the filter. Once you've done that, carefully put a finger into the filter, pull it up and back to get it out, being very careful that you don't kink the wire mesh or damage it in any way. Now to clean the filter, I just siphon some petrol into an old jam jar and then use that in which to swill the filter around to try and get all of the particles out and get the felt in nice and clean. Then I'll leave the filter to dry for half an hour, then have a really good look at it. If it's damaged in any way, any perforations or score marks on that felt, or damage to the gauze cage, then replace it. I also have a good look at the gauze in the funnel through which we drained the old oil. Now there are a couple of bits of muck in there, but there's no bits of metal, and that's the important thing. Now look what I got for Christmas, a cheap Chinese bogle scope. Now rather than sticking this up my nose and ended up in casualty, I use it to look into little bits of the bike where I want to know a little bit more. In this case, I had a good look inside the oil tank, especially looking at the little gauze filter that sits over the oil line that goes to the engine. When I did that, I noticed there was a little bit of debris or dirt on there. I'll do my best to show it you in this image here. Now it might be something or nothing, but I got a pipe cleaner in there and cleaned it up as best I could. Now to refit the oil tank drain plug. Now to replace the oil filter, just dropping it into place and gently pushing it in. Then the rubber O-ring that goes around the neck of the aperture. Next, the dishwasher, making sure that the recess is uppermost because that's where the spring is going to sit. And then finally, the spring and the cap. As you put these on, it's easy to displace the rubber washer, so just try and make sure that everything's central as you screw it down. Now it's time to put the new oil in, and as you put it in, remember you're only going to use about a third of a big can like this, so take it steady. The minimum fill level is halfway up the oil tank, but I suggest you want more than that. The less oil you have, the more heat that small capacity is going to absorb, and it can start to sort of boil off, and it also concentrates any dirt you've got in there. So well over half. The maximum amount is 1 inch from the opening of the filler cap, and so I try and get it about 1.5 to 2 inches from where the filler cap mouth is, and that seems to work well, and it doesn't spit any oil out when I do that. Then replace the filler cap. Those saddle bolts are real buggers to put back in, so here's a dirty little trick you might want to try. Just get a bunch of blue tack, stick it on the end of a spanner, and then put the saddle bolt on the end of that, and that will allow you to push the bolt up through the middle of the spring and just get the nut on it for a couple of turns without it falling off and bouncing around on the garage floor. And while you've got the oil out, it's a good idea to top up the primary chain case. This needs checking every week or so anyway, and just fill it into the lower level of the inspection hole. Also fill it if the transmission feels harsh, because that's a sign that it's not lubricated enough. And now with everything buttoned up again, it's time to get the bike out, start the engine and check for oil circulation. Normally when you start the bike and check for oil circulation, you see it within 4 or 5 seconds. But when you've done an oil change, it takes ages. It can take over a minute sometimes. The main thing is to be patient, but to listen out. And if you hear any suspicious mechanical sounds, especially if you hear sharp knocking, then obviously shut the bike down. Okay, so that's the oil change and cleaning the filter and topping up the chain case. Hope you found that useful. If not, then let me know. If there's a better way of doing it, then please get in touch and I will change the video. Thanks for watching and safe riding.